All right, welcome to another episode official 2 of the Best Known Church podcast. If you are outrageous in your vision, if you are relentless in your actions and your pursuit of your calling, and if you have unreasonable faith because our God is unreasonable, because anything less than relentless execution of our actions and relentless pursuit of our calling does not make a good and faithful servant. If that's you, you're in the right place. Today, I want to talk to you about a failed communication strategy that churches just keep going to. And if we've never met, my name is Justin Nava. I've been doing church marketing for over 10 years, NavaChurchMarketing.com, and I want to see your church become the best known organization of your community. I want to see you become relevant again. Dare I say, become the cornerstone again of your city. Driveways used to be empty on Sundays. Buildings used to be closed on Sundays because people were gathering in community and in relationship to fellowship with one another and worship the Creator. But the church has been irrelevant and relegated to the sidelines, and other things have taken that place to find fulfillment in life. And of course, that thing that people keep going towards keeps not fulfilling. So it's time that we take back the community. And when I say take back the community, I don't mean by force. I mean rise above the noise of the world, rise above the chaos of everything around us, of the politics, of the news, of the media, of the distractions, rise above it all. So people can finally say, oh, that's what fulfilled and life abundant looks like through your church as the conduit, so people can see the gospel and have their burden eased by Jesus. The goal is not to make your church known just to build up your church. We want to build the kingdom. And if making your church the best known organization, so that if someone needs something, if someone needs hope, if someone needs healing, if someone needs purpose, if someone needs help through their divorce, if someone needs food, if someone needs clothes, if someone needs help with their kids, if someone needs anything that the Lord will provide for them, I want them, as they think first in their own mind, oh, the church, that's where I can get it. If someone can't think of something and goes to their friends and family and says, hey, I need this, they should think, oh, the church is where they should go. And then if they think in their head and they ask their friends and family and says, I don't know, dude, and they go to Google, then your church should be there. But how do you get there? How do you clearly communicate this church, this message, this gospel message is what you need? A lot of churches will focus on what Paul said, be all things to all people. So let's try to do everything. And what ends up happening is after a few years, you get burned out. You can't clearly communicate to anyone. And the church eventually can close its doors. And no one notices, even though you are trying to reach everyone, no one notices. So I understand, and I actually do believe as a church, universal church, capital C church, we should be all things to all people. However, the hand cannot see. The ear cannot smell. We are local bodies of the universal church, right? So we need to communicate in the way that our church is uniquely equipped and uniquely gifted to uniquely reach a unique group of people. And we need to recognize that our churches cannot reach everyone. If you tell me, hey, our church, we're going to try to reach anyone and everyone. Perfect. How come you don't have a signer signing your sermons? And then how come you don't have a Korean speaking service, right? How come you don't live stream if you're not live streaming, right? Because some people just cannot get to your church. And how come you don't, you can't be all things to all people. It's impossible. Not only that, God has not called you to be all things to all people. He has uniquely gifted you to, again, uniquely reach a unique group of people. So just by going to everyone, you cannot reach all of those people. And when you try to be all things to everyone, when you try to reach everyone, you end up reaching no one. Think about McDonald's and Taco Bell. Okay. I am 30, how old am I? 34? I'm 34. And I regularly visit both McDonald's and Taco Bell. However, McDonald's and Taco Bell have totally different messages to reach totally different people. And yet, they do reach all people, and all kinds of people do go to those establishments. McDonald's is a family-focused marketing company. Not marketing. I mean, they're a hamburger company, but their marketing is family-focused because they're a family company. They have a kids' meal. They have family bundles to feed 4, 5 people, and even parties, which, of course, the family is going to gather and feed the family. Taco Bell has a younger, more single-person, college-focused marketing. They don't have a kids' meal. I've taken my daughter to Taco Bell, and I realized, y'all don't got a kids' meal. All right, let's try to figure out what she'll have, right? They have cheap food, right? I mean, when you think cheap fast food, you think Taco Bell because they want to reach the young people who don't got much money, right? And so, but just because I'm a family man doesn't mean I can't go to Taco Bell. I don't feel alienated going to Taco Bell and getting a $1 burrito. And at the same time, as a college kid, I don't feel alienated going to McDonald's because I don't have a family to feed. I'll just give me the number one, no onions, right? So just because you focus your message towards one kind of person or one type of audience or one type of group of people does not mean you alienate the others. It actually means you clarify exactly who you're equipped to serve. And hey, you'll reach other people, right? My wife regularly gets a kids meal from McDonald's. Does that mean she feels alienated? No. She just knows kids meal means small meal. The McDonald's doesn't need to try to call it the small meal to try to reach everyone. Oh, but if we call it that, it'll be confusing because people will think we should have a large meal or whatever that is, right? So it's okay to speak to one kind of person or speak with a certain language that is meant for one kind of person. You're not going to alienate people, right? Let me start actually. Let me share with you a story. I meant to start with this and I just got ahead of myself. You've heard lots of different versions of this story. I'm going to tell the clean version because this is just, I don't want to be a stumbling block to anyone or cause anyone to be an obstacle in front of anyone, but I'll tell the clean story. And many, many pastors have heard this story and probably told this story. So if you know the story, don't spoil it to those around you listening to you, with you, pastor. Just humor me for a second. A man and his son were once going with their donkey to the market. And as they were walking alongside, a countryman passed them and said, "Fools! What is a donkey for but to ride upon?" So the man put his son on the donkey and they went on their way. And soon they passed another group of men who said, "What a lazy boy. He lets his father walk while he rides the donkey." So the man said, "Hey, son, get off the donkey and let me get on the donkey." But soon they passed 2 women. And one of the women said to the other, "What a lazy son what a lazy man that he would ride the donkey and make his son walk." Then they decided, well, we'll both ride the donkey. So they both got on the donkey, and as they were riding into town, another man passed them and said, "Ugh, that poor donkey. You and your son riding the donkey at the same time. It must be exhausted." So they got off and tried to figure out what to do. They both walk along the side of the donkey, and they're called silly because donkeys are meant to be ridden. The father gets on the donkey, and people say, "Hey, what a lazy son." Or what a lazy father making his son walk. And then the son gets on the donkey, the father walks, and they get gossiped about. So they think, okay, well, maybe we should carry the donkey. Maybe the donkey isn't meant to walk at all. So they tie the donkey to a little post and they hoist it on their shoulders and they walk into the market. They draw all kinds of attention. Look at these 2 guys carrying this donkey. And they all start laughing and shouting and hollering. The donkey gets scared and kicks out of his holding and ends up falling over, breaking the bridge they were on. And then they all go down into the water. Right? You can't please everyone because then you'll end up pleasing no one. There's a more crass version of that story. And I'm not going to tell it here, but you can imagine what word would be used instead of donkey. You know, you try one thing and it ends up displeasing someone, so you end up trying to please them. You end up displeasing other people. Politics is a great example of that. But just because you aim for one type of person doesn't mean you alienate everyone else. Imagine a bullseye. Imagine you're throwing darts or shooting a firearm. But I'll use throwing darts for YouTube here because YouTube doesn't want you to speak in certain terms, and I'll have to just deal with that for now. But imagine you're throwing darts, and you just want to hit the board. You just have this large board, and you just want to hit it. Okay? And I often tell my daughter this: just try to hit the board. But if you just try to hit the board, your spread is going to be very wide, and you're going to end up missing the board often. If I tell you, though, aim for the bullseye, that spread is going to tighten up. And you're not going to hit the bullseye every time, but you are going to hit the actual target more often, and you will hit other marks other than the bullseye. And that's exactly what having a clear message really aimed at the people you're gifted to serve and called to serve and really equipped and able to serve the best. If you aim for that one bullseye and communicate your church to that one bullseye, you will end up hitting other targets. But if you try to hit all those targets, just in a general, hey, let's just take that approach, you're going to end up missing the board entirely. I can go examples of this all day. Think about Gatorade. How many of us drink Gatorade but see ourselves in the Gatorade commercial? You don't see a sweaty old man with a beer belly or whatever gut drinking Gatorade after trying to mow his yard. You don't see that. You see athletes in their prime that have just did 2-a-days, maybe 3-a-days. And yeah, we used to do 3-a-days in our prime. But they're drinking Gatorade to rehydrate because they, so desperately need it after those 3-a-days or after training or after in the middle of a marathon, maybe even. But I'm telling you, Gatorade is bought more by old men who just need to rehydrate after mowing the yard, after digging a ditch, construction workers that need to rehydrate and feel better, and even sick people, right? You get a stomach bug. What's the best? You got to get those electrolytes back in you, right? Pedialyte does. I mean, we do it for our babies. We do it for ourselves. So Gatorade really focuses their marketing on athletes, yet anyone needs an electrolyte drink. And so even though they're focusing on athletes, I don't feel alienated. I know that when I work hard and I need to rehydrate with electrolytes to make myself feel better, I'm going to drink Gatorade. You're not alienated. You're clarifying. And that's good. That's an okay thing. And we all know this preaching from the pulpit. If we preach a sermon on marriage, we're not alienating everyone that's not married. Anyone can benefit from that, whether you're planning marriage, reflecting on a failed marriage, maybe in a difficult marriage, if you're preaching the ideal marriage. And even if you are, quote unquote, in an ideal marriage, you don't have to, marriage sermon can be for everyone. Even on Mother's Day, preaching on what an ideal mother is, or maybe not an ideal mother. I shouldn't say that. Preaching on what God's plan for mothers is, or God's plan for fathers. You're not alienating the other sex. You're not alienating non-mothers. That sermon is equally applicable to grandmothers, mothers-to-be, women planning to be mothers, and even husbands, how you can support your wife as a mother, or young kids, how you need to start praying for the future mother of your kids. All of those things. So if you just say, I'm going to preach this message to everyone, you're going to have a 20-minute sermon intro. I'm about to tell you God's plan for fathers, But if you're not a father, if you're a grandfather, let me tell you what you can get out of this sermon. If you're not a father, or if maybe you're a future father, you're a husband that doesn't, I'm going to tell you what you got to get out of this message. If you're not married at all and you don't have kids, I'm going to tell you what to get out of this marriage. If you're out of this sermon, if you're a single father, I'm going to tell you what to get out of this sermon. If you're a teenager, I'm going to tell you what to get out of this sermon. If you're a child, I'm going to tell you what to get. Oh my goodness, dude, will you just preach the sermon and I'll take what I need to away from it? God will show me what I need to take away from this sermon. You don't need to spend 20 minutes trying to cover all your bases when you just need to tell me, what is God's plan for fatherhood? What does that look like? What does a loving father need to look like in the eyes of his family, in the eyes of God, in the eyes of his kids, in the eyes of his spouse? Just tell me, right? If you try to preach to everyone, you're going to preach to no one. And we know this, especially as people who teach. When you're on stage or in the pulpit or even just preaching in front of an audience, you don't say, all right, everyone, now if this is you, take this away. If this is you, take this away. No, you preach to one person, and you know in your mind's eye, is that the right phrase, in your mind's eye? Yeah. You're preaching to one kind of person. And someone will come up to you afterwards and say, Pastor, it feels like you were preaching right to me. And oftentimes it's not that mind's eye person, right? I imagine a certain kind of person is watching this, and you may look completely different. And that's okay. I think God has that intentionally. So I will say this, you need to look at who you're. Okay, let me not get ahead of myself here. I love getting ahead of myself. It's my greatest weakness. I hate this so much. A lot of people are like, Justin, slow down. I often start something and I got to backtrack, and I apologize for that. And I appreciate you for sticking with me. When you preach to everyone, you preach to no one. But when you preach to someone will hear you. Let me say that again. When you try to preach to everyone, and this isn't a preaching message, this is a communication message, but I'm going to allude to preaching because in my mind's eye, the pastor is listening to this. However, if you're not a pastor, you're still going to understand what I'm saying. If you're trying to preach to everyone, you will preach to no one. But if you try to preach to someone will hear you. One more time. If you try to preach to everyone, no one will hear you. But if you try to preach to someone will hear you. There you go. Clip that one. That's the goal. Because if you do preach with that one person in mind, someone will come up to you and say, man, I felt like you were preaching right to me. And when you do try to preach to everyone, no one's going to come up to you and say that. Right? And I can imagine, all right, this lesson is for Timmy. I'm going to teach Timmy. I'm going to preach. This lesson is for Timmy. But I know Cassandra's going to come up to me, or I don't know. But afterwards, Cassandra will come up to me and said, oh my gosh, I felt like you were preaching right to me. Because even though I preached the message for Timmy, God spoke to Cassandra. And yet, if I try to preach a message to everyone, I'm going to have a 20-minute intro. I'm going to have a 5-minute watered-down lesson. And then I'm going to have a 10-minute outro. I only spend 5 minutes teaching and 30 minutes trying to justify that 5-minute teaching or whatever the math is. I don't math good. So what do we need to do? Okay. We know we've got literal case studies of marketing that works, promotion that works, communication that works, that speaks to one person and ends up communicating to a lot of people. And we also know that when we try to preach to everyone, no one hears us. So what are we supposed to do? How do we know who we're supposed to preach to? Not preach to. I'm stuck on preaching now. How do we know how we're supposed to promote our church, to our internal members, to our congregation, to our leadership team, and then also to our community? Because I don't want to alienate someone. Well, guess what? If you say we're a church for the family, people that don't have families aren't going to feel alienated. They're going to say, I want a family. I need to go to here and figure out what I need to do, or how God needs to prepare and open my heart so I can better equip my family. And hey, if you're like, if you're a divorced man who's had a divorce later in his life but has kids with families, he's going to go to church and he's going to say, you know what, this is where I'm going to learn how I can better equip my kids to have success in their family. And then, of course, if you're a kid, well, you're probably going to that church because your parents went to that church. because it equips them to have a better family. And your message doesn't have to be, we're a church just for families. If you're not a family, don't come to our church. That's kind of where looking at who are you reaching now and double down on who that is. And I know what you're thinking right now. Well, if I look at who I'm reaching right now, if I look inside my church to see who God's equipped us to serve, there's all kinds of people. There's a few young adults. There's a lot of older folks. There's a few silverhead folks, which silver-haired folks. And then there's some married people, divorced people. There's a lot of young people. There's not many 30 or 40-year-olds. Maybe that's because I'm a 50-year-old pastor. I don't know. So I'm reaching all kinds of different people. Who am I supposed to pick? And if I do pick, will I lose those existing people? No, because you're looking at the differences. You need to look at the similarities. And this is the magic message. People have paid me thousands of dollars to ask this question, and they find much more success by me asking this question. Instead of examining all the differences in your people, what do they all have in similar? What do they all have in similar? What do they all have in common? What is similar among all those people? People tell me, I got all kinds of different people. Perfect. What do they all have in common? Let me tell you, they're all just trying to make a better life for their family. Perfect. I think that's perfect. Because we know that better life is achieved through a relationship with Christ and in fellowship with others. And so your message is not make a better life for your family at Bill and Ted's Excellent Church. No. Your message is God has something great for your family, and we want to show you what that is. That could be your message. Now, obviously, I would want to refine that a little bit. You're not going to find your message in a 30-minute YouTube video or a 30-minute podcast. It takes literally, it takes a lot more time than that. Now, we've got a really streamlined way at Nava Church Marketing to get that message for you in less than 30 days. And in that 30 days, we get you a message that's going to reach 10 times more people in 90 days. Because you're going to know exactly who you're equipped to reach and communicate that message. And that message, even though you're shooting for that bullseye, you're going to reach a lot of different people. And instead of trying to figure out what target you're going to hit and be worried that you're not going to hit the other targets because you are going to shoot for that one target, when you do shoot for that one target, you're going to hit a bunch of other ones. And so look at who you're reaching now and don't look at all the differences. Oh man, we're hitting a wide age gap. We're hitting multiple generations. So we got to try to reach all those generations again. No. What do they all have in common? You know what? We're hitting people that are struggling because they're diseased people. And they came to our church and God healed them because God's given us the gift of healing. Perfect. Double down on that. Well, you know, God's given us a lot of blue-collared workers. We have young blue-collar workers that are construction folk. We have older blue-collar workers that are the foremen. Perfect. Lean into that. Your work does not define you. God defines your identity. Find your identity through our work here at this church. Because they don't want their identity in work. They may not even want their identity in their family. They know their identity needs to be found somewhere else. Your church can equip them for that. Right? And then maybe you are the family church. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people will say, why does so many churches want to communicate to families? What about everyone else? Well, if you communicate to families, you're going to hit the other people that want that family, that want to save that family, that want to re-heal their family, that want to build that family. That's okay. Right? I've got a client that I was like a light bulb just went off. I've got a client that specifically goes after introverted people in their community because there's a lot of they're in a community that has a lot of really like churches that are doing a great job reaching the folks that want to be an active involvement, an active relationship with Christ with other people. But what about the people that don't feel comfortable around other people? So they have a large auditorium that they meet in. They don't want to fill it, because that's not who God's called them to reach. And so you know what their message is? It's very focused on the individual. God has a larger plan for your life. Come find out what it is here. And then when you do go to that church, they have greeters, but the greeters don't intentionally ask you a bunch of questions. The greeters say, hey, glad you're here. That's it. That's it. Intentionally. Now, if the guest has some more questions, the greeters can answer that question. Right? But they're not going to say, hey, glad you're here. How can we serve you? Where can I take you? Would you like to know where the restrooms are? Hey, would you like to fill out this form? Whoa, bro. It's exhausting enough for me to just be at this church. So instead, glad you're here. Maybe you tack on, let me know if there's anything that I can answer for you or anything that I can help you find. And that's it. Back off. And a lot of churches will die if they act like that, because that's not who they're equipped to serve. This church thrives because people feel comfortable. And if they go beyond 50% capacity, they're going to feel like this might not be the church for them, and they're going to miss what God has for them. So look at what all your people have in common. That's your message. That's what you double down on. So examine. So first of all, you have to, here's your takeaway, right? Here's what you need to do. You need to look at A, your messaging, and then B, who you're currently reaching right now. This is just the starting point. This is not the end point. Okay? So don't lose the forest for the trees here. Okay? This is your starting point. And then, is there a disconnect? Well, we're just trying to reach everyone. Well, we're actually only reaching one kind of person. Good. Now imagine if you tried to reach that one kind of person, that's how you reach 10 times more people. Because you're not skipping over that person by trying to reach someone else you're not actually equipped to reach. And that someone else is going to know that you're not going to be able to serve them, and they're going to pass you by. So instead of trying to reach 10,000 people and only reach 100, let's try to reach that 100, and as a result, God's going to give you 10,000. That's how, and he's not going to give them to you all at once, right? If he does, it's because he has a plan for them. And guess what? When we rely on him, he's going to help us reach that 10,000. But I believe, just by the way he's created us, if we do really focus down on reaching that 100 kind of people, that one kind of person that we're reaching 100 right now, we can easily see another 1,000 of that kind of person come to our church. And because of that, we're going to reach a bleed over. If we try to go towards the introverts, well, my wife's an introvert, I'm an extrovert, but guess what? I will go to a church that she's more comfortable in because I can deal with that. And when I'm done at that church, I'm going to be like, man, that was great. I didn't really get to meet a lot of people, but maybe there were other families in that same situation, and I naturally gravitated towards them. And so my wife feels fulfilled because she's got a tight group of people that she can rely on. And I feel fulfilled because I've met some new people. And I love that. And I can serve that at that church because the introverted flock might need an extroverted leader. So there's a place for me to plug in. And my wife can be fed alongside her discipleship journey until she's nurtured and developed into that person that can become that leader. Church, Wes Gay, me and him have some disagreements, but me and him also have a lot of similarities and a lot of commonalities. And he said it best. And I totally just lost my train of thought here. You ever do that? You ever try to qualify yourself and then you lose your train of thought? Man, terrible way to lose your train of thought. But let me tell you what it was, because I just remembered it. He said church has so long been an extroverted game. It has been a place for extroverts to gather, and the introverts left feeling unfulfilled, and therefore they left the church. So maybe there's a place for them. And you could be that church, but you've been trying to play the extroverted game when God's called you to play the introverted game. Or maybe you've been trying to play the introvert and God's been calling you to play the extrovert. Okay, back to your action points. Look at what your message is supposed to do. Look at what your messaging is currently doing, and then look at the person God's been calling you to, and then see the disconnect. And then once you see the disconnect, say, okay, God's obviously giving us this type of person, so let's make our messaging speak to that kind of person. And you're going to have 10 times more people to serve in 90 days. I promise you that. And then in 1 year, you're going to be the best known in your community. And when I say your community, I don't mean your city. I mean the people that God's called you to serve. And when you really go after that kind of person, your community is going to know who that is. So when someone says, man, I feel like there's something that I need to figure out in my faith, but every time I go to church, people just want a bunch of things from me. I want to be fed. I want to serve, but I don't want to be bothered and overwhelmed. Oh boy, have I got a church for you. How have you not heard of this church? Let me tell you. And in 1 year, everyone's going to know who you are. And you will be the cornerstone of your community. You may not be the cornerstone of the city, but you are going to be the cornerstone of the community. Now imagine what that would look like. You ever have that buddy in college or when you were in high school or maybe just being a young adult who would always take the same interests as the woman he was dating or the girl he was dating? You ever have that? And then you would wonder, or he would wonder, man, why am I so miserable? And you would sit there and say, you're bending over backwards to try to be something that this woman would love, but that is not you, and it is miserable. And every time you either burn out on the relationship and call it quits, or she gets wise to you and she calls it quits. But just be yourself. Be who God's made you to be. Well, church, I'm telling you, be who God's made you to be. I had a friend like that, very uncomfortable with me. We would watch Marvel movies. We would watch sci-fi movies. We would play video games together, played a lot of Guitar Hero. But when it came to the ladies, oh no, he didn't do any of that. He was a jock. He was a sportsman. He was a football guy. No, he was a basketball guy. No, he was the artsy guy. No, he was the smart scientist guy. And every time, well, he did have some interest in some of those things. It just wasn't him. He just wanted to be the guy to chill on the couch, play some games, go out once every other week, and just be chill. But instead, he was going to sports games. He was studying it up way more than he needed to or even wanted to. Or he would go to events that he just didn't care about. And he was exhausted. And then finally, I think our junior year, I think our third year in college, he finally said, oh my gosh. Now, he didn't really say this, but you could tell. He finally came to terms, I'm just going to be me. And if a woman comes along, great. And if not, then hey, maybe I'm called to just be single. He got married a few years later because God showed him that God brought along a woman and showed him that she was the one and showed her that he was the one because he was created to be that kind of person, and she felt called to marry him. And they're still married today because he finally understood, this is who I am, and this is the kind of woman that's going to have to accept me and love me and enter into that covenant relationship with me. And here she came. And if he had been too busy chasing the women and pretending to be a jock, when that future wife came along, she would have looked at him and said, well, I guess he's not my man because he's just a jock and I don't want to, it's not me. So who are you trying to reach and who are you trying to impress that you're not equipped to actually serve? That's the question. And that's what we need to fix. So yes, let's be all things to all people as a universal church and as a body of believers. But as a body, as a church, who are you equipped to serve? Who has God gifted you to reach and connect and engage with and bring along in your discipleship? Then how can you reach more of that type of person? And God will bring you an umbrella of people. But that one person is who you're supposed to communicate to. That's how you reach more people. That's how you engage with more people, which then helps you make more disciples, which then creates a greater impact, which then, yes, that's when God, I believe, that's when God will look at you and say, well done, good and faithful servant. Because you didn't try to spend all this time trying to reach all these type of people when I called you to reach this one person. And as a result, you changed the kingdom. That's where we need to go. That's what we need to do. God bless. And if you have any questions about any of this, give us a call, 832-861-7654, 832-861-7654. We'll talk about it. We'll even give you the roadmap of what that looks like, whether you work with us or not. And starting next week, I'm actually going to have a line that you can call or a message you can leave, and we can talk about this stuff more on the show. So God bless, and wherever you are, like and subscribe, all that jazz. God bless you guys.